Hello and welcome to my channel. This is an educational channel. We take a look at great theories of everything ancient and modern and do deep dives into them. Try to highlight how we all might be able to use these things in our own lives for our better spiritual, physical, mental health, our paradigm shifting, our awakening to 5D consciousness, our formation of a holistic worldview, just kind of putting all the things together so that everything makes sense and we're not just a big jumble of unrelated facts, but that we have some kind of glue to, tether everything to and have a, like I said, a holistic view about it. Today is our 61st video that we've done on the book called Mastering the Core Teachings of the Buddha by Daniel Ingram. And Ingram is a veteran meditator and has spent a lot of time in monasteries throughout the Far East and really all over the world, and has spent a lot of time meditating, also a lot of time conferring with, Buddhist monks in these various monasteries. And he's kind of a geek, and he geeks out on putting together models of our basic stage of consciousness, our levels of enlightenment, and also the stages of consciousness. So also everything that you need to know to get started with Buddhist meditation, which isn't really, it's just a method. It's just a science. It's a technique you can try, and the claim is that everybody has the same basic experience of going through the same basic stages as you, penetrate further and further into reality by gaining insight. By first, the concentration meditation is about focusing on an object and keeping your mind focused on that. And then the insight meditation is about investigating the sensations, both physical and mental, that you have right in front of you as they arise and pass away, and investigating them for the three characteristics of impermanence, dissatisfactoriness or suffering, and no self, or not self. They're not you, they're not satisfactory, and they're not permanent. And we're in, I think, chapter 37 or 8 about some of the various models that Ingram talks about, with regard to enlightenment. Are you kind of like, as you have attained certain kind of markers in Buddhism, people will say, oh, I'm enlightened, or this is an enlightened master. And these models kind of give you various criteria for, if somebody is enlightened or not. We went through about half a dozen of them, and there's a lot more. So we're going to start right here with the action models, which involve perfecting or limiting the things we can and can't do in the ordinary sense, usually relating to always following some specific code of conduct or performing altruistic actions, or believing that everything we say or do will be exactly the right thing to have done in that situation. Then the powers models, involving gaining abilities, either ordinary or extraordinary, like psychic powers. The energetic models involve having the energy flowing through the energy channels in the proper way, the chakras spinning in the proper direction, cleaning our aura, clearing our aura, etc. The sleep models involve changing aspects of sleep, such as how much we sleep, what happens in dreams, and being conscious while sleeping. Specific knowledge models involve gaining conceptual knowledge of facts and details about the specifics of reality, as contrasted with the models that deal with directly perceiving fundamental aspects of reality. Psychological models involve becoming psychologically perfected or eliminating psychological issues and problems, having no stuff to deal with, no neuroses, no mental illnesses, having perfect personalities, etc. The thought models involve either limiting what thoughts can be thought, enhancing what thoughts can be thought, or reducing or stopping the process of thinking entirely. The God models involve perceiving or becoming one with God, or even becoming a God oneself. The unity models involve becoming one with everything in some sense. Physical models involve having or acquiring a perfected, hyper-healthy, or excellent physical body, such as having long earlobes, beautiful eyes, a yoga butt, or super fast fists of steel. The biological models, those that relate to the degree to which realization transforms our actual biochemical function. Radiance models involve having a presence that is remarkable in some way, such as being unusually charismatic or radiating love, wisdom, or light. The karma models involve becoming free of the laws of reality or the causes that make bad things happen to people, and thus living a blessed, protected, lucky, or disaster and illness-free life, or perhaps creating no new conditions that could lead to any possible suffering for anyone. The perpetual, I can't read that word, perpetual something, perpetual bliss, possible, perpetual bliss models involve saying that enlightenment is a continuous state of happiness, bliss, or joy, the corollary of this being a state that is perpetually free from any form of pain. Related to this are models that involve a perpetual state of jhanic or meditative absorption. The concentration models involve the various fruits of concentration practices and typically relate them to awakening in some way. The immortality models involve living forever, usually in an amazing place, heaven, nirvana, a pure land, etc., or in an enhanced state of ability, angels, bodhisattvas, sorcerers, etc. The transcendence models involve the idea that we will be free from or somehow above the trials of the world while yet being in the world, and thus live in a state of transcendence. I don't know if this says the function models or the unction models involve getting off the wheel of suffering, the unction, the round of rebirths, etc., and thus never being reborn again, or even ceasing to exist in any way at the moment of enlightenment. That is the great poof on the cushion, not to be confused with the more mundane atmospheric consequences of a legume-based diet, as anyone who's been on a vegetarian meditation retreat knows all too well. The loving models, I guess, involve us loving everyone and everyone loving us. The equanimity models involve awakening being characterized by a perfect, pervasive, perpetual state of equanimity. The no preferences models involve having no preferences, opinions, tastes, likes, or dislikes. Special models involve us already being or becoming special. Social models involve being accepted for what you may have attained, that you have attained something because people think you have, and variance on these themes. The ultimate reality and unreality models involve adhering to specific positions about questions of ultimate reality and unreality as they relate to awakening and the true nature of reality. Meaning models involve advocating for an optimal set of values, goals, and meanings for practice, as well as the claim that awakening will result in a specific set of views regarding values, meanings, and the answers to perennial questions. Other models involve a wide range of other effects that get described and tacked onto models of awakening, and I will try to sort through some of them. As if you haven't presented enough already. Okay, that's it. Okay, back to the text. Like me, you have probably run into most or all of these ideals of awakening in your spiritual quest and within yourself at some point in time, either consciously or not. Given these high ideals, it is not surprising that we find the task of awakening daunting, if not preposterous or completely unattainable. Imagine yourself as the universally accepted, radiant, immortal angel bodhisattva, bright-eyed, yoga butt endowed, all-loving one with the universe, perpetually mindful, perfectly healthy, emotionally perfected, psychologically pure, unimpededly altruistic, non-thinking, desire-free, psychic superhero, star child of love and light. And then notice how this image may be in some contrast with your current life. If you are anything like me, you may notice a slight discrepancy. I will take on each model, relate each to a few of the traditions I'm familiar with, and try to make sense of where these ideals come from. I will also address which ones are realistic and helpful in our context, and which are beautiful dreams that can either help you to identify areas to work on or really screw up your spiritual quest if you are not careful. You will note that none of these model names so far come from any formal tradition. To relate them to the traditions, here is a list of some models from Buddhism. There are 5 of them here. The 4-path model from the Theravada, which involves becoming a stream enterer, 2nd path, once returner, 3rd path, or non-returner, and then arahant. The 5-path model from the Mahayana. The 10 Bodhisattva Bhumi model from the Mahayana. The ideal of Buddhahood from all the Buddhist traditions. And the sudden and gradual awakening schools. There are other models from other traditions, for example, St. John of the Cross, Ladder of Love, or Divine Ascent, and I have already mentioned these in the Progress of Insight section. I won't go into much detail here about them, but when you are familiar with the models I am about to discuss, then you should be able to make sense of some of them. Okay, this one is called the non-duality model. The non-duality model is without a doubt my favorite of them all. It essentially says that the goal is to stop a process of identification that turns some patterns of sensations into a doer, perceiver, center point, soul, agent, or self in some very fundamental perceptual way. By seeing these sensations as they are, the process can be seen through gradually until one day The last holdout of duality flips over, and there are no more sensations that trick the mind in this way. My favorite quote that articulates this model is from a sutra called Bohya, the Bohya Sutra, in the Udana. In it, the Buddha was talking with Bahia of the bark cloth, and said that realization involves this direct insight, quote, in the seeing, just the seen, in the hearing, just the heard, in the sensed, just the sensed, in the cognized, just the cognized, end quote. And then Bahia of the bark cloth was promptly killed by a cow. On his passing, when asked about his future rebirth, the Buddha said that, having practiced according to that pithy instruction, Bahia of the bark cloth had become fully unbound before his death, meaning fully awakened. I may repeat this quote about the sense doors being exactly themselves without any additional complexity to make the point of how preposterously profound it is. Basically, there is just a field of sensations as there was before, but now all these sensations are progressively just seen to be as they are, and all the sensations that we generally call me are just a part of this process. In this model presented by the Buddha, direct experience of sensate clarity provides the basis of awakening and eliminates the sense of separation and the dualism of the perceiver. Remember, the Buddha was not into unity as the answer, having rejected that on numerous occasions, nor was he into duality, clearly, which yields non-duality. Yea, Theravada, so simple, so direct, so immediate, so practical, I just love it. This non-duality model does not imply anything else. It promises nothing related to any other models, except in some loose way the fundamental perception models and the direct perception models that I will address shortly. The non-duality model is one of the most practical models for practice in that it focuses on simply perceiving sensations as they are right now. For this reason, it is my favorite model. Waxing scholastic and away from pragmatism and empiricism momentarily, I realize that some ultra-Orthodox Buddhist traditionalists from certain strains will notice that the word non-duality does not appear in the Pali Canon or the commentaries. Using the term non-duality, particularly as it is often associated purely with Vedanta in the minds of those who don't know better, can really annoy the crap out of some who feel that anything possibly Vedantic should be kept far away from anything Buddhist to avoid violating fire codes and to protect the children, like the two are matter and antimatter, and their contact would blow up the planet. While I don't fully buy into the whole all religions point to the same truth thing, as clearly there are some significant and largely unresolvable areas of doctrinal conflict, there are distinct reproducible commonalities that occur when people pay very careful attention to bare sensate reality, because bare sensate reality is how it is. Thus, stating that my favorite models involve non-duality burns some serious bridges with fervent traditionalists. However, I am a pragmatist, empiricist, and phenomenologist at heart, far more than I am a politician. Obviously, and as the concept of non-duality as articulated by the Buddha in the Udama fits very well with reproducible experience, it is the one I use. I could have called this model the Udana model, or even better, the Bahia of the bark cloth model, as that really would have had that old-time Theravada feel to it that I admit I also love aesthetically. Then, even though it was the same model in terms of the direct experience it points to, all the strict canon heads would have been nodding, ah yes, the Udana, very old, very authentic, nice choice. Clearly, I have all the political savvy of the cow who killed poor Bahia of the bark cloth, and perhaps someone with better skills will one day present this advanced, technical, practical, reproducible, reality-based model in some softer form. Back to business, the concept of non-duality as an experience arises many times, even in the early Buddhist literature. But it is just phrased differently, such as in the Udana quotation earlier, in the teachings of dependent origination, more on that later, and other deep philosophical areas of even very old Buddhist texts. The concept is also clearly pre-Buddhist, arising in the Vedantic literature perhaps a few hundred years before the birth of the Buddha. It is also incorporated into various Mahayana schools in the word Advaya. There are those who think, now wait a second, there is non-duality and then there is non-duality, and never the twain shall meet. A view whose dualistic absurdity requires no further comment. If you need help sorting out that sort of complexity, I will refer you to the internet and libraries for more if you wish, with Wikipedia doing a nice job of the complex history of the concept of non-duality and its usage across various traditions. I will talk more about the non-duality model as we go, and have already talked about it often in a less direct way. I present it first to serve as a foil or counterpoint to all the other models, and it is one of the only models that can withstand rigorous sensate reality testing without qualification or difficulty. Most of the other models contain some degree of truth in them, either literally or metaphorically, but this one you can hang your hat on all the way through your practice. This awareness develops gradually with some sharp jumps along the way, leading to the endless debates about the sudden versus gradual schools of awakening, a subject that will hopefully become clearer as we go, but probably deserves some mention here. So this section is called the Sudden Schools of Awakening. There are schools of awakening, what I term the sudden awakening schools, particularly in some Zen traditions from China and Korea, and in some interpretations of various Hindu traditions. This is not a complete list, which say that awakening happens in one big shift, and that's basically it, regardless of exactly how you define it. They deny claims of the progressive schools, which include the Theravada, Tibetan Buddhist, some other strains of Zen, most schools of Sufism, Kabbalah, other Western traditions, etc. That there is mappable territory before awakening and during the process of awakening, and deny that there might be lots to do after stream entry or whatever you want to call it. Possible explanations for these schools include that there may be a few rare individuals who manage to go straight to something that feels to them like a complete or final awakening due to whatever interesting way they are wired or how they practice due to whatever remarkable excellent causes, with training and meditative accomplishment in previous lives being the stock Buddhist explanation. While I have never met anyone who did this, There are various accounts in our times of it happening, though I suspect that careful questioning regarding what happened before and after would yield at least a somewhat predictable progression. This is purely my own speculation based on familiar patterns. There may be schools founded or influenced by people who got to the first stage of awakening, stream entry, and somehow never realized there could be anything more than that, or got trapped in a lie about being fully awakened when they hadn't yet realized there was more to realize and never retracted their initial and erroneous claim. It is possible that they went through a progression of stages, but their definition of enlightenment was such that only some final shift met their criteria, such that they deny, dismiss, or fail to acknowledge that the various shifts and previous causes that got them there, and instead acknowledge the various shifts and previous causes that got them there, and instead focus only on the final one. There are people who just thought that sudden awakening was the single dogma that must be believed and stuck with it regardless of any issues of having insight. There are likely other explanations I haven't thought of or run across. Being that every single accomplished practitioner I have ever known has followed a progressive path, including myself, it is very hard for me to believe the sudden claims, except for remaining open to the possibility that there may be the exceedingly rare practitioner who occasionally manages to pull this off and thus imagines, based on their limited experience, that this is how it happens in general. In short, if you manage to do this, more power to you, and please let me know. Otherwise, I would bet on the gradual progressive schools, and if you attain something that you are pretty impressed by, give it time to see how it holds up when life's inevitable vicissitudes come knocking at your door over the months and years after that grand shift of perspective. Most of the people I know who are deeply into this stuff have reported many shifts and experiences that were quite impressive for some period, but later revealed aspects that could still use some maturation or improvement. Okay, this section is called the direct perception models. The direct perception models are also useful models pointing to something that we can learn to perceive. They relate to the ability to have more and more of our experience be known through a more pristine, clear, direct way of perceiving the sensations that make up experience. At certain stages of practice, particularly mind and body, stage 1, the arising and passing away, stage 4, and the middle and last stages of equanimity, stage 11, what is meant by directly perceiving things can become temporarily more obvious, as experiences may suddenly take on a vividness that they didn't have before. At the stage of conformity, 12, change of lineage, 13, and path, 14, as well as subsequent entrances to the 3 doors, we get a very transient but flawless taste of this perceptual perfection. Beyond these brief moments of sensate clarity, the states of awakening can involve permanent shifts of the way reality is processed, such that there is a substantial increase in how clearly things present and how little interference there is with them. By interference, I mean 2 things. First, as people begin to practice, they will notice that a substantial portion of experience is not the material data they always thought it was, but instead is mostly conceptual processing of the mental impressions that were made of those original sensations, thoughts about those mental impressions, and the like. For instance, they may eat a bite or 2 of food and not notice that beyond those first few bites, they didn't really feel or taste much of the rest of the meal. Or they may see a sunset and then spend a lot of time thinking about their reactions to the sunset rather than continuing to notice the actual colors and shapes of the sunset. This interference is not only a product of attention turning away from the original raw sense data, but also the interference that occurs when alternating between the physical sensations and the mental impressions, creating a distortion of the physical sensations based on them not presenting when the mental sensations are presenting. It is not that those mental impressions aren't also raw sense data, as they are, but most people do not perceive them as such. Thus, most of their experience, even of pleasant phenomena, is substantially reduced by the degree to which they instead focus on thoughts about those experiences. In that same vein, the mechanisms of attention, effort, mindfulness, investigation, and all the things that appear to regulate, process, monitor, evaluate, and otherwise modulate what would seem to be attention can themselves create a similarly mental, but in some ways more fundamental interference pattern that distorts, detracts from, and interferes with the raw freshness and vividness of the original sensations. One of the mental modifications that can result as we go deeper into the world of sensate clarity is that these veils of distortion can fall away such that we are left in a world that is suddenly much more pristine, more defined, more naturally present, and less distorted. In fact, everything that seemed to be a distortion is itself more clearly perceived. But this lack of distortion is more than that. It is a relying on the bare sensations as being sufficiently representative of themselves, such that substantially less processing of them is necessary. In this way, those processing elements that remain are now just part of the shimmering field of experience, and many of those processing elements don't occur anymore at all, as they don't need to, since the original things naturally represent themselves. The best result of this increased clarity is that when it is well developed and locked in as the default mode of perception, reality naturally shows its true nature without any effort required to perceive it.